What's up, comic book fans? Welcome back to the M.I.B. Master Toy Museum. I'll be your curator today. Guys, we have another sensational episode from the strange and the macabre. Today's episode, we bring you all the way from 1971. Psycho. This was and look at the price there. This was a comic book by this stage of my life, let's say 1985, 1986. I was really hooked on these books growing up in the 1970s. So I made it my business to try to track down a lot of these beautiful books that my father really introduced me to back when I was a kid. And this was one of the prime books, horror comic magazines that I had, and from the 1970s. And I wanted to find this, and I found it. I think it was 86. I'm aging myself here, guys, so bear with me. 86. I was 16 years old. My brothers and I, we would go to the our local comic book stores and hunt down these books for treasures, for keepsakes. And this is one that I picked up a long time ago at 16. And through the course of the years, moving around and all the other things that come along with getting old, I misplaced this particular book and didn't think I would see it again. So I was fortunate enough through our wonderful suppliers, comic book suppliers, and we'll give our guys a shout out, Carbo and Anthony's Selling Heroes. They have an eBay store that we were able to locate this beautiful. You can locate anything. That the power of the internet now. Go figure. So we were able to really locate this beautiful book and get a good deal for it too. It's in pretty decent condition as well. There's some little nicks and knacks to it, but for the most part, this is a beautiful book. Carbos and Anthony's, they do such a phenomenal job with the shipping and the grading of these beautiful books. You're talking about a book from 1971. And to give you an indication of that, in 1971, I was 1 year old. So that shows you it aged very well. This book is loaded with action, horror stories, 68 pages. Another awesome reason I wanted this book was for the Frankenstein story primarily, but I met a new horror hero, if you will, in this book. It was the Heap meets the Horror Master, and we'll check that out. We're gonna crack this book open, guys, and if you're just joining us, welcome to the M.I.B. Master Toy Museum. Like and subscribe, guys. This is what we do. We want to thank all of our new subscribers. Our comic book family has been growing by leaps and bounds. So we are grateful and very appreciative of our new comic book family. We're bringing more comic books to our museum, and we're excited about that. Look at all the wonderful ads that were in these beautiful comic magazines from the early 1970s. Hypnotic glasses, and you go out and hypnotize somebody for $2. X-ray camera. My parents would never allow me to have that. Here's the layout here. Let's see. Our Frankenstein story starts on page 4. So let's go to page 4. There's just a ton of beautiful stories. So you have about 6 or 7 stories. And let's go. And this is just the beauty of this book. And you had a ton of artists that worked on these, that really worked on these comic books, on these comic magazines. Let's get you. This book smells like 1971. And once again, I would find a nice quiet place in my home, and especially as a kid, somewhere on the floor in my living room, on my living room floor when I was a kid, and I would have my my Pepsi or whatever I was drinking, and these big, beautiful horror comic magazines, and I would go to another time, another place of terror. Guys, what do you think of our Psycho comic magazine? Do you have this particular one? Do you remember these big, beautiful books? And once again, these stories were told in their entirety. You didn't have to wait a month like with the standard comic books. You know, you have to wait for another issue to come out to see if the bad guy won, if the superhero was destroyed. You didn't have to do any of that. You could follow the whole story in its entirety. And it seems just by following these panels here, these comic panels, it seems like the roles are reversed. It seems like Frankenstein's doing all of the doctoring, I should say. They're celebrating there. Just beautifully, beautifully done. And they, like I said, they have other stories. I want to get to the heap. Let's find the heap story here. And each page I turn, it's just it takes me further and further back into my childhood. It's like flipping each year. Here, look at this. More horror and terror comic magazines. They were all the rage back in the 1970s. And here's a crime novel comic magazine. And here we go. Here's the one I've been looking for here. The heap. Seems like he's fighting these the undead zombie-like creatures. The heap meets the horror master. And when I read about the heap, I said, this is a really, once again, a reluctant superhero, not by his own choosing, per se. Let's get you a little bit of information on the, and they give you the his origin. As you can see here, he's looking for food, and I remember reading this. It goes back to his origin. He was a pilot in the Army. Just beautiful, beautiful. Once again, the artwork was just beautifully done. Just one marvelous horror story, or story of terror after the next. Just beautifully done. Just awesome. And I would have loved to see these beautiful horror magazines continue into the new millennium. I would love more of these books. They maintain their collectability. They maintain their charm throughout all these decades. And you just, if I had that type of power, guys, in the comic book industry, I would most certainly have these books readily available now to the newer generation of comic book collectors and readers and enthusiasts. Just beautiful, beautifully done. And it puts us at the end, but as you can see, our reluctant hero has survived the day and defeated the horror master. Here's the news articles that people could write in and share their opinions and thoughts on new issues and new storylines. And some of these stories were kind of twisted and vicious. So they weren't. Well, they were horror magazines, so they got away with some things back in those days. I don't have an issue with it though. I'm glad my father brought these beautiful comic horror magazines home to me, and no issue whatsoever. And this was the reason it sparked a really a love of comics and the need to collect as many as I could. And now that I am an owner of a museum and we have started our comic book sector here at the M.I.B. Master Toy Museum, we are absolutely hooked now, and we'll be bringing more of these beautiful comics to you, as we will be with the superhero genre as well. We'll be bringing you the more vintage superhero magazines, comics such as the Hulk, Spider-Man, Batman, Detective Comics, things of that nature. We want to appeal to the masses. Set this beautiful book back up here. So we really want to appeal, because we have a new viewership now. We're a lot of our comic book brethren and family, they're asking to see more comic books here at the M.I.B. Master Toy Museum, and that's what we want to deliver. So where we were initially talking about maybe a one or two comics a month, we want to try to do maybe one or two a week if possible. But definitely we would like to get a new comic book out probably every week if possible, or at least 3 times a month, because it's just absolutely fantastic. We're having a ball, bringing these beautiful comics to you guys and sharing them with you here on our museum channel. And guys, with that being said, you know our routine. We would like to thank you guys for hanging out with us today at our museum and allowing us to share this beautiful Psycho 1971 comic horror magazine with you. God bless. And keep collecting.